Hi, welcome to Oaks of Righteousness. We are on teaching number 6, and that is performance orientation. In my time of working in inner healing with adults, I think that maybe performance orientation might be the most common thing that I see us struggle with. And when I say us, I mean us, because I was the best, an expert at performance orientation. The signs of performance orientation are someone who is very competitive to a fault, which when I was younger I didn't think that was possible, that you could be competitive to a fault, but it's true. Someone who is a perfectionist. That could be a sign of performance orientation. Someone who is a severe overachiever. That could be a sign of performance orientation. And I think it's the Marines, they have that, I don't know, special ops, really bad dudes have that saying, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. That sounds cool, but if you are someone who is in bondage to performance orientation, that can be really dangerous and not healthy for you and not healthy for anyone that loves you around you. Performance orientation is simple to define, but it's difficult to get out of the grips of. The definition: basically, you get your sense of value. Your sense of value is tied to how well you perform. And again, many parents do this without meaning to, without intending to, but they continuously send the child messages that I favor you more when you're performing well. If a child believes that they have their parents' favor when they're performing well, and that they don't have their parents' favor when they're not performing well, they will grow up to be in bondage to performance orientation. And it can look pretty ugly. I've seen it look ugly in my life and in friends of mine. Some friends of mine, I saw it look pretty ugly as well. There was a movie in the 80s or 90s. It was called Searching for Bobby Fischer. And most of us know that Bobby Fischer, maybe the greatest chess player ever, but certainly the greatest American chess player ever. And in this movie, Searching for Bobby Fischer, for those of you that are not familiar with Bobby Fischer, he challenged the world champion, who was a Russian, challenged him, beat him, and then disappeared for 7 years. Nobody knew where he was. He was off the grid. The world champion chess player, off the grid. Nobody knew where he was, what he was doing. So, in the world of chess, the parents of these young genius, prodigy chess players can really go over the top. And in the movie, they showed how every big chess tournament, they'd have to haul the parents into a room somewhere else because the parents were so competitive and would start fights. But what the parents didn't realize was their children were receiving the message that your value is tied to how you perform. The main character of Searching for Bobby Fischer, it's based on a true story. His name's Josh Waitzkin. He was, people thought, maybe the next Bobby Fischer from America. And the movie takes place when he's about 11 or 12 years old. His father was a baseball player and had become a sports journalist, and he covered baseball. When his father finds out how good Josh is at chess, he starts taking him to these tournaments. He gets him a private teacher. And you see this world where all this pressure is put on these very young kids. Well, Josh, one day, he's at a tournament and he tanks. He tanks the tournament on purpose. And they show the father just, what were you doing? You know better than that. I can't understand you sometimes. And the kid is just very forlorn. They go home, and the mother is played by Joan Allen. The father's played by Joe Mantegna, which may or may not mean anything to you, depending on your age. But the mother talks to the father privately, and she says, don't you see what you're doing to your son? She says, don't you understand? He lost on purpose. Because, and the father says, that's ridiculous. No one would ever lose on purpose. She said, yes, he lost on purpose because he wanted to see if you would love him even if he wasn't the best. She said, can't you see that? Your son is reaching out. He's trying to find out if you love him even if he fails. The father says, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely absurd. Nobody loses on purpose. And of course, he knows that I love him regardless. And she says, does he? She says, you played baseball in Little League. How many of those boys in Little League were afraid that if they failed, that their father wouldn't love them? How many of those little boys in your Little League baseball, on your Little League baseball team, how many of them were afraid that their father would be disappointed if they lost or if they failed? And he turns around and he says, all of them. All of them were afraid that their dad would be disappointed in them if they failed. All of them were afraid of how their dad would react if they failed. And that was so telling. That was a snapshot of a lot of American society. So Josh ended up being a really good chess player, but he also maintained a very healthy relationship with his father, and he didn't become one of those people like Bobby Fischer who wins a tournament and then disappears for 7 years. This is one that it's so hard to break free from this because it's so prevalent, but also it's very subtle, just like a lot of the problems that we deal with in this broken world. And the God of this world, He doesn't let us see clearly what's happening to us. We need God's light to shine in and show us. And then we can start to be healed. But I think performance orientation, for a lot of people that I've worked with, performance orientation really shapes their perception of their relationship with God. If a child believes that they are favored when they perform well, and if a child believes that their parents are disappointed in them as a person when they don't perform well, that person will project that onto God as well. And that person, I think the thing that's most difficult for the adult who's in bondage to performance orientation, they have a hard time accepting God's grace. 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 Martin Luther, he's given credit for receiving the revelation of grace, a Catholic monk. He finally came to a place where, I go to confession. I confess sins that I'm not even aware that I committed. And then I'm given penance. How do I know? When do I know? When do I know that I'm forgiven? When do I know that I've shown enough remorse? When have I done enough penance to be accepted by God? And he was given the revelation. You need grace. You need to understand God's grace. It's not grace if we could earn it. It's not grace if we could deserve it. But so many of us because of our childhood and the messages that we receive. Many times the parents aren't intending it. The messages we receive, there's something deep in us that believes for us to earn God's favor, we must somehow prove that we deserve it. And that's the farthest thing from the truth. The farthest thing from the truth. I want to close this just by telling a very quick story about my cousin Larry. My cousin Larry is an amazing person. Amazing person. Larry loved to play basketball. He loved basketball. When he was a junior in high school, he got cut from the high school basketball team. He loved playing basketball. I've never seen anyone try so hard at basketball as my cousin Larry. He got cut from the basketball team when he was a junior. He went home and he told my Uncle Benny. Uncle Benny asked Larry, well, how'd it go? I got cut. And his dad, Uncle Benny, said, you weren't good enough, were you? And Larry said, no, I wasn't. And Uncle Benny said, that's why I love you so much, Larry, because you always do your best and you never try to make excuses when it doesn't work out. Let's go play the guitar. They love to play the guitar too. And they went and played the guitar. You see, Larry, he knew in his heart how he performed meant nothing to how much his father loved him. Now, the very next year, two of my best friends were seniors. I was a junior. They were seniors. Two of my very best friends, they got cut from the basketball team. They went home and told their dads they got cut. Their dads went to the high school, demanded that coach be fired. The coach was crazy. He don't deserve to have that job. Now, this is the subtlety of performance orientation and the bondage. What those two parents didn't realize is they were reinforcing in their two sons, you're only valuable if you're performing well. They thought they were doing right by their two sons. But the message that their sons received was, my value is tied to my performance. Once again, your leaders will have discussion questions for you. I pray that God will shine the light through any clouds that we might have in this area. And my prayer is that we can all know in our hearts the grace of God and how He wants us to know that we never have to earn His favor. Thanks.